Okay. Thanks, everybody. Couple of remarks in preface. First of all, as I've said to several people, there's a very large amount of information on here. Obviously, I want to keep it down to a reasonable time, so I apologize in advance if I may not cover something that is that you know about and consider important. I look forward to hearing other people's observations and insights in our discussion period afterwards. And second, a note about terminology. You know, our language and our way of speaking is always evolving, and lately it's been considered rather insensitive to refer to people as slaves because that just reduces their entire identity to the fact of their slavery. And so I am going to try to use terms such as enslaved people, enslaved Africans, enslaved workers, but I may slip up from time to time. I'm just learning this myself. Also, I did discover in my research a term that I like a lot, which is freedom seekers, and those were the people who fled the South and the slave states to, to go via the Underground Railroad and whatever means they could to the free states, to Canada, and I think it's it's a much more pleasant term than runaway slaves or enslaved people trying to escape the plantation or whatever it may be. So, with that being said, the history of slavery in New Jersey is unfortunately tied into this area even back before there was a New Jersey. The colony that we now know as New Jersey was started by the Dutch West Indies Company as part of the colony of New Netherland. And when they founded the settlement of New Amsterdam, now New York, in 1625, they brought some slaves over there. And shortly after that, they founded another settlement across the river known as Pavonia in what is now Jersey City. You can still see that name for a certain part of Jersey City. And there were slaves there as well. So that's something that has been in existence in this area for 400 years or more. Now, the economic and social conditions of New Netherland and New Jersey were much different from the South. They did not have the large-scale plantations that the South did, but it was still profitable to use slave labor for certain things. Most of the enslaved Africans in the northern states, especially here in New Jersey, they were either construction workers. Many of the buildings, the infrastructure of what is now New Jersey was built by slave labor. They were also domestic workers and field hands. Most of the women worked in houses as housemaids, cooking, cleaning, looking after children. Many of the men worked on farms, and they would do the typical things that a farmhand would do in those days, looking after the crops, looking after the animals. And the jobs they worked were just what your typical laborer or farmhand or maid would do, except that they were not free and they were not compensated for it. Now, the initial conditions of enslaved people in the New Netherlands colony were a little better than what existed in the southern states and even what existed later in New Jersey. The people enslaved by the Dutch actually had the right to enter into legal contracts. They could earn money, and they actually were allowed to work after hours on their own and earn money and accumulate property of their own. So this was the case in the early 1600s. Now in 1664, the English seized the Dutch colonies and New Netherland became New Jersey, and there were some changing fortunes in that time. The English were not quite so generous with the civil rights as the Dutch were. Now, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but just to give you an idea of the infrastructure of the slave trade in early colonial New Jersey, there were major markets for enslaved workers in the Pavonia colony, which was across from New York, and also in Camden, which was across from Philadelphia. So even back in the colonial days, New Jersey was benefiting from its position on that corridor. So a lot of the enslaved Africans would come in through the port of Perth Amboy, and Perth Amboy was what they called a free port. And as I understand it, that meant there were no restrictions on what kind of cargoes could be brought in there, and some of those cargoes were enslaved people from Africa. And there are records of large barracks there, which are no longer standing, but back in the 1600s, 1700s, the people would be taken off the ship, and they would be temporarily housed there until they were sent to the slave markets in Jersey City, Camden, whatever other part of the state that may be. So an interesting thing that happened when the English took over the colony was that the people who had been enslaved by the West Indies Company were set free. These early enslaved workers were not owned by individuals; they were owned by the company. And so when the English took over, I don't know if the company dissolved or what, but they renounced slavery, and so in the 1660s, you had a community of free African Americans in New Jersey. So in addition to slavery, the African American community in New Jersey also goes back to its very origins. Now, once New Jersey became an English colony, the fortunes of African Americans, both free and enslaved, sort of went back and forth in several different changes of the law and what they were allowed. As I said, under the Dutch, the enslaved people had at least a little bit of civil rights. Now, after the enslaved people from the Dutch colony were freed, there was still a traffic of people from Africa who were sold in these slave markets. So the enslaved community continued to grow. It was big business. It was big money, and that's the primary reason why New Jersey was one of the last northern states to let go of slavery, because there were a number of very wealthy people who were making great profit on the slave trade, on slave labor, and some things haven't changed in 400 years. Money talks, even in the legislature. So one of the first things that the English proprietors of the colony did was they gave out land by a system they called head rights, and they wanted to encourage population of the colony. The colony was very small when they took it over from the Dutch, and they would grant land to people based on the number of people they brought in to work on the land. And in that case, they didn't make a distinction between free people, enslaved people, indentured servants, and so a lot of these big landowners would bring in enslaved workers as a profitable way to increase their land holdings. Now, as time went on, towards the turn of the century, around 1700, some people in New Jersey were not all that happy about, to be frank, non-white people coming into the area. And so they did not abolish the slave trade, but they put a tariff on it. And so here we go, once again, things don't change. Tariffs as economic weapons. So that made the importation of enslaved people more expensive, but it did not stop it. And that tariff was in force until 1721, when it was up for renewal, and the legislature decided not to renew it, again, at the influence of the wealthy landowners. So another thing that they did, in 1704, they enacted a law which people called the Slave Code, and it took away some of the rights that black people had, both free and enslaved. It took away the right of any African American people to own property, which some of them had previously had. They were not allowed to legally enter into contracts and lawsuits as they had before, and there were even curfews to restrict their movement at certain hours, which obviously were enforced on black people and not on white people. So that was the time from, the 1700s were a pretty bleak time to be a black person in New Jersey. Another thing that many of you might have heard of, the colleges of New Jersey, which we're very proud of, and rightly so, have started to do some research and become more transparent about their own history of involvement with slavery. Both Princeton University and Rutgers have put up websites, have issued books talking about how these colleges, they benefited from the labor of enslaved workers to build some of their facilities. They benefited from monetary donations from some of those wealthy landowners I mentioned who owned many enslaved workers, and especially in the case of Princeton, there were Princeton, I hadn't known this before I started looking into it, but Princeton has a reputation of being the most southern by culture of the Ivy League schools. Many Princetonians were the sons of plantation owners from the South, and there was a lot of debate, pro and con, on the slavery question at Princeton in the 18th and 19th centuries. And one of the movements that got started in Princeton was the colonization movement. And you might have heard of the African nation of Liberia. And I see Barbara nodding. Barbara, you've probably been there, haven't you? No, but at any rate, Liberia was founded basically as a place of refuge for freed Africans. The idea, to be frank, and I find some white liberals even think that way today, is that a lot of these people were willing to say, yes, slavery is a bad institution, and we approve of freeing these people and giving them rights, but just let them live far away. And one faction of the colonization movement wanted to start an African American community out on the western frontier, which probably would have been Ohio or Illinois back in those days. That never came to much, but the nation of Liberia was founded by thousands of African Americans who were freed from slavery and transported over back to Africa. And its history could be an entire another talk in itself, but suffice it to say it's had as many challenges as any other African nation. Of course, the colonization movement was eventually overtaken by the abolition movement, and once again, because of the great economic influence of slavery and the owners of enslaved workers in New Jersey, there was pretty much broad consensus that although it would be good to free the slaves, they didn't want to do it all at once. And someone mentioned, this would be a great economic shock to the colony, to the state at the time, to have this large group of formerly enslaved people who had no property and no experience living as free people. So, you may not agree with that, but a lot of people in those times saw that as something they could agree with. And so in 1804, the New Jersey State Legislature passed what is called the Act of Gradual Abolition. And the idea was that slavery would be effectively phased out over years and generations. Just as a point of reference, talking about the the numbers of people that were affected by this. In the census of 1800, it recorded 12,000 people as being enslaved. And in terms of the overall population of the colony, that was almost 6% of the population. So 1 out of every 17 people in New Jersey in 1800 was enslaved. Now, the way that this law worked was that anyone who was currently enslaved would remain so. Any children who were born to African American families in either free or enslaved would be considered free, but they had to serve apprenticeships, so they would still be enslaved for a portion of their lives. And these the age of manumission, which is basically the freeing of an enslaved person. So the age of manumission would be 21 for females and 25 for males. So you still got a couple of decades of slave labor out of these people. And when you think about the implications of this, the way the law was phrased, so anyone who was born to an enslaved mother would live the beginning of their life as a slave themselves. And it's really horrible to think about, but some people saw the implications immediately. That if you have a young woman, a girl, and she gives birth to children before the age of 21, then those children are also going to remain enslaved for the first 21 years of their lives. And was there trafficking of young women, sexual abuse? Sadly, there was. I haven't read any of those stories directly. I don't think I'd want to, but yes, there were advertisements in publications of specifically black women of quote unquote breeding age, and so it's sad and terrible, but this was done in New Jersey. The time frame we're talking about here is between 1804 and 1848. Finally, by the 1840s, the abolition movement got even stronger. People decided that they had had enough of this arrangement, and so they closed this loophole, and they said that children, any children born in New Jersey to any mother were free, but anyone who was still enslaved at that time would be considered indentured servants for their lifetime, which is really just slavery by another name. And that continued up until the Civil War, actually. So there were still some enslaved people, and the numbers were smaller. That 12,000 that I mentioned in 1800, that was really the peak of the enslaved population in New Jersey. By 1830, there were about 2,200 people still enslaved in the state, and that represented 2/3 of the enslaved people in the quote-unquote free northern states. So, sadly, New Jersey was really a center of the slave market for much of its history. And then, when the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was passed in 1865, I read the text of the amendment, which is very short, but the phrasing of it is very, very precise and very specific. And they said that no one in the country, I can't quote it directly from memory, but they said no one in the country shall be held in slavery or involuntary servitude. So they were tackling that quote unquote life indentured servitude thing as well. The second part of that is that no one shall be held in slavery or involuntary servitude unless part of a punishment for a crime for which they've been duly convicted. And we'll come back to that, but I'm sure a lot of you know that That's a factor even in today's United States. Now, in the 19th century, a little more pleasant chapter of New Jersey history relating to slavery was the establishment of the Underground Railroad. And once again, New Jersey took advantage of its position along the trade corridors, the Delaware River, the roads between Philadelphia and New York. Many people came from the slave states of Maryland and Delaware. It was not that hard to get a boat across the river, and I like to visit Cape May, which has actually a very rich Black history, and you would have people coming to, let's say Cape May or someplace like what's now Cumberland County or Gloucester County, and they might have been on the run for days, weeks, who knows how long, and some of them decided this is where they'd like to stay. And so there were, as I said, there were already communities of free African Americans that had established themselves. And so many of these freedom seekers would come to New Jersey and settle down, and that built some pretty rich African American communities from quite an early day. There were some notable names associated with New Jersey and the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman is one that almost everybody has heard of. She settled in Philadelphia, but she worked in Cape May as a hotel worker, and with the money that she made working there, she used that to fund her further expeditions to the South to encourage more of these enslaved people to come with her. And another name that's very, very well known in the history of the Underground Railroad and civil rights is a man named William Still. And he also settled in Philadelphia, but because there was a lot of Underground Railroad activity in New Jersey, he worked in New Jersey a lot. He was the son of a couple of escaped freedom seekers who moved into a community. They came from a family in Maryland whose last name was Steele, and they came into New Jersey and found a community. And apparently Still was a pretty common last name, so just to kind of blend in and make it harder to find themselves, they changed the name from Steele to Still. And there was actually a brother of William Still, a guy named James Still. He was very famous in South Jersey as a physician. He was very intelligent and very ambitious, and he wanted to be a doctor, but he was also perceptive enough to know, and he wrote this himself. He said, "I knew that I had no chance of being admitted to institutions where medicine was practiced." So instead, he educated himself. He read all the books he could find on medicine. He learned about medicinal herbs and traditional healing methods, and some of those traditional methods are actually grounded in sound medical science. And he became a very well-respected man. He was known as the Black Doctor of the Pines. He, I forget the exact town, but he lived down in the Pine Barrens, and for many decades he was a great provider of service to the African American community. So yeah, you had once again, you can do a lot of research on the Underground Railroad itself. The sites where people moved through, there were basically the corridors were either up along the Delaware River, and then from once it got up to Philadelphia, people would either go to Philadelphia itself or across the state. The Underground Railroad stations, the map of them almost looks like a map of the Northeast Corridor, highways and railroads, because that's where the people were. And once they got to Philadelphia or New York, they would either settle there or move further on. Many of them went up to Canada. But many people in New Jersey, overwhelming number of them African Americans and either formerly enslaved or the children of free African Americans would help their fellow people, help these freedom seekers get to someplace where they could be safe. And after the Fugitive Slave Act was passed in 1850, you got these bounty hunters coming to try and take these people back to the South. And some of these black communities in New Jersey would sort of counteract and take the law into their own hands. There are records of a slave hunter coming into one of these towns and almost getting lynched himself by the community. They certainly wanted to stick together, and once you have freedom, you don't want to let it go. So they were willing to fight for it. So, yes. So, even after slavery was abolished and the 13th Amendment was passed, making slavery illegal over all the United States, of course, the challenges of the African American community in New Jersey were far from over. And these all black or largely black towns, some people have said, well, they had a community of their own people. They separated from the whites of their own free will, but their free will was really limited in this case. I would say it was more of a coerced decision than a free one. Many of these people, they did not trust white people. They certainly didn't think that they would get the same justice, the same opportunities that white people had. And so sadly, you had these, it's sort of bittersweet, because you had these people settling in communities where they did feel accepted and they did feel at home, but at the same time, they did not feel accepted by the rest of the state. Another effect of this was the segregation of education. On paper, New Jersey abolished segregated schools in 1881. However, from what I have read, that particular law was rather loosely enforced, especially in the southern part of the state. I have seen information about towns in South Jersey, including Cape May. Cape May had a separate elementary school for blacks and whites up until 1948. Some of it was not even particularly enforced by law, but just by the demographic reality of the situation. People would, the government of a town would draw up school districts, and they wanted to keep people from certain neighborhoods together and make it easier for them to get to school. And of course, it was very easy to draw the lines among the racial communities, so that you had a black school district and a white school district. Not necessarily enforced, but it certainly was the reality. On the Jersey Shore, I've mentioned Harriet Tubman. Cape May was a seaside resort back before the Civil War, and most of the rest of the Jersey Shore in the 19th century, they had hotels, they had resorts. Many people would come down and spend their vacations there. They had many black people working in these places, but could they vacation at them? No. You had a lot of these places would not admit black guests or Jewish guests, and some of them continued that right up until the passage of the various Civil Rights Acts in the 1950s and 60s. It was usually the practice that black men would be employed as porters and bellhops, and black women would be employed as cooks and sometimes servers in some of the more pedestrian dining rooms, but the more upscale hotels would, of course, only employ white women as servers. But that was something that, within living memory, maybe some of you have gone to hotels at the Jersey Shore that didn't allow black people to stay there in the 1950s or 60s. And then, of course, you have housing, and this is something that happened not only in New Jersey, but really all over the nation. You had the practice of redlining, where banks and even sometimes government institutions would not provide financial services, social services, or would provide them at a lower quality for black and other minority neighborhoods. And then when the legislature and popular sentiment turned against housing discrimination, you would get what they called reverse redlining, where the banks would, they would see a place where, okay, it was underserved or not served at all. If we get in first and we offer these services, then we're going to get a lot of customers. But they would have discriminatory rates. These people would be charged higher rates for loans and for insurance. And of course, they would always say, it's just business. This neighborhood is a higher risk, so of course we have to charge more. And you also get practices such as steering, which is still going on to this day. If you have an African-American family looking for a home, sometimes real estate agents will suggest certain towns to them that they know are already have a large minority community, and will not bring them to majority white towns. And you look at here in Sussex County. I mean, we do have a black population in Sussex County, but from what I've heard, when you've got a black family looking for a home in New Jersey, people won't come up and suggest Sussex County to them. So that's something that we're still dealing with to this very day. And finally, the whole implications of the 13th Amendment, as I said before, the fact that it didn't say no slavery at all. It said no slavery except as punishment for a crime. And you look at what they call the prison industrial complex these days. You've got people in prison who are working for sub-minimum wages, in some cases no wages at all, and that is slavery. There's no other way to describe it. And the population of the prisons, of course, is by majority black still. I just looked it up this morning, and New Jersey State Department of Corrections says that 59% of their prisoners are black. And that certainly does not reflect the demographic mix of the entire population of the state. So, the only conclusion I can draw is that we've still got a ways to go. We've got a lot of chapters in our past that we need to face and own up to, and we've got a lot of things going in the present that we certainly could do better. So.